Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. So sometimes studying can feel like a total drag, right?
It really can.
Like you're just drowning in information and you're not sure how to even keep your head above water.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to dive into the world of studying smarter, not harder.
Love it.
We've got tons of cool stuff to share with you guys, from research papers to student forums to even some insights from cognitive scientists.
That's awesome.
So get ready to have your minds blown, because we're going to uncover some surprising tips and tricks that might just change the way you approach learning forever.
One thing that I've always found fascinating is this idea that we've been told for so long that success in school just boils down to hard work, like just put in the hours and you'll get the grades. But what if I told you that simply working harder isn't the whole picture?
Well, are you saying that all those late nights I spent cramming for exams were basically a waste of time?
Not necessarily, but think of it this way. Your willpower is like a muscle.
Yeah.
You can only flex it so much before it gets tired.
Makes sense.
Right. So instead of just trying to power through, we need to find ways to work with our brains, not against them.
That makes so much sense, because I remember reading this post on a student forum where someone was talking about how they took pages and pages of notes, but still felt completely lost when it came to actually understanding the material.
Yes, and that happens all the time, right?
Right.
We think that just because we're putting in the time, that information is automatically sinking in, but that's not always the case.
Right.
It's not just about the amount of time you spend studying, but the quality of that time.
Okay, so it's about being more intentional with our study habits.
Absolutely. It's about actively engaging with the material, making connections, and finding ways to make it meaningful to you.
So instead of just mindlessly copying down notes, we should be asking ourselves questions, coming up with examples, and really treating our brains like a playground, not a prison.
You got it. You're getting it. And speaking of making things fun, one of the most effective techniques that came up again and again was the idea of spacing out your study sessions.
So you mean like, don't cram everything in the night before the exam? My high school self is cringing right now.
Yeah, cramming is definitely not the way to go. It might seem counterintuitive, but giving your brain time to process information is key. When you space out your study sessions, you're actually giving your brain a chance to make those all-important connections and really solidify what you've learned.
So it's like letting the dough rise before you bake it. You can't just throw it in the oven right away.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more interesting. There's this technique called interleaving, which is basically about mixing up different subjects or topics while you're studying. Think of it like cross-training for your brain.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Can you give me an example of how that would actually work?
Sure. Let's say you're studying for a history exam. Instead of spending an hour on just one period, try switching between different eras every 20 minutes or so. This forces your brain to work harder to recall the information, making those neural pathways even stronger.
So it's like challenging your brain to a little mental obstacle course.
Exactly. And the more you challenge it, the more it grows and adapts.
This reminds me of something else that came up a lot in our research: retrieval practice. I remember reading about how testing yourself is one of the best ways to really learn something.
You're absolutely right. Retrieval practice is like a superpower for your memory.
Okay, tell me more.
It's about actively recalling information without looking at your notes, which helps strengthen those neural connections.
This actually makes me think of my mom. She used to quiz me before every single test, and I have to admit I wasn't always thrilled about it. But looking back, I think she was onto something.
Yeah, for sure. It's like any skill, really. Musicians practice their instruments, athletes train their bodies, and we need to train our brains to retrieve information effectively.
Okay, so we've talked about spacing, interleaving, and retrieval practice. What other study strategies did we unearth in our research?
Well, one that really stood out to me was the power of visual aids and mnemonic devices.
Oh yeah, I remember those. Some of the examples in those study tips articles were hilarious. Like there was one with a cartoon of a scientist wearing a bonnet to remember a researcher who studied intelligence.
That's right. It may sound silly, but engaging your imagination is a powerful way to make information stick.
Totally. I'm starting to think that studying doesn't have to be all boring textbooks and endless note-taking. Maybe we can actually have a little fun with it.
Absolutely. And remember, it's all about finding what works best for you. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to learning.
So true.
Yeah.
All right, before we get too carried away with all these fun study techniques, there's one important thing we need to talk about, and I have a feeling you're not going to like this one.
Let me guess, sleep.
You got it. I mean, what student actually gets a consistent 8 hours of sleep? It feels like a myth.
It's definitely a challenge, but trust me, sleep is absolutely crucial for consolidating everything you've learned. Think of it as your brain's overnight filing system.
So you're saying those all-nighters I pulled in college were actually counterproductive?
Well, let's just say you were probably not doing your brain any favors.
My mind is officially blown.
And don't forget about regular breaks, too. It's all about working smarter, not harder. Remember, your well-being is just as important as your grades.
Speaking of well-being, one thing that really stood out to me from all those student forums was how many people talked about the benefits of study groups. It seems like connecting with others can be a game changer.
Absolutely. Learning doesn't have to be a solitary pursuit. In fact, collaborating with others can be incredibly enriching. It's about recognizing that we don't have to go it alone. Connecting with others allows us to learn from different viewpoints, solidify our understanding by explaining concepts to others, and build a supportive network. And if we connect this to, the idea of active engagement, explaining a concept to someone else is a fantastic way to solidify your own understanding. It kind of forces you to organize your thoughts, right? And articulate the information in a clear way.
So it's like teaching is the ultimate test of whether you really get something.
Exactly. And even if you're not formally tutoring someone just having discussions with classmates or bouncing ideas off each other can be really helpful. It can help you see things from a new perspective.
It's like that saying, 2 heads are better than 1, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes all it takes is a fresh perspective to unlock a concept that's been giving you trouble.
Absolutely. And remember, learning from your peers can be just as valuable as learning from a textbook or a teacher.
That's so true. And I think that's one of the things I love most about these deep dives. We get to hear from so many different voices and perspectives.
It's true. It's like we're all learning together.
Yeah, exactly. It's a collective learning experience.
And speaking of different perspectives, I think it's important to remember that there's no one right way to study. What works for one person might not work for another.
That's so true. I used to think there was some magic formula for success. But the more I learn about this stuff, the more I realize that the real key is to experiment and find what works best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about finding a rhythm that feels sustainable and enjoyable, not just something you force yourself to do.
So it's not just about studying smarter, it's about studying happier.
Exactly. And on that note, I think it's important to emphasize the importance of self-care. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Okay, preach. I'm all about self-care. But how does that actually tie into studying?
Well, when you're feeling stressed or tired or overwhelmed, your brain just isn't going to function at its best. So make sure you're getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, and incorporating activities you enjoy into your routine.
It's like we were saying earlier about willpower being like a muscle.
Yeah.
Right? You need to take care of your mental and physical health to make sure that muscle is strong and ready to go when you need it for studying.
Exactly. And taking care of yourself can be as simple as taking a short walk outside, listening to your favorite music, or spending time with loved ones. It doesn't have to be complicated.
I love that. It's about finding those little moments of joy and rejuvenation throughout your day.
Exactly. It's about creating a balance between work and play, and recognizing that taking care of your well-being is just as important as achieving your academic goals.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I feel like I'm starting to see studying in a whole new light.
That's great to hear. And remember, learning is a lifelong journey. It's not just about memorizing facts for a test. It's about expanding your horizons, challenging your assumptions, and becoming a more well-rounded individual.
Well said.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, I want to make sure our listener is walking away with some actionable takeaways. What are some key things they should keep in mind as they embark on their own study adventures?
Okay, well, first and foremost, remember that it's not about working harder. It's about working smarter. Embrace techniques like spacing, interleaving, and retrieval practice to make the most of your study time.
Love it. Those are definitely going on my list.
And don't be afraid to get creative and find what works best for you. Whether it's using visual aids, joining a study group, or simply taking regular breaks to recharge the key, is to find a rhythm that feels sustainable and enjoyable.
So it's all about personalization and finding that sweet spot where learning feels more like a fun challenge than a dreaded chore.
Exactly. And remember, learning should be a source of joy, not just a means to an end.
I love that. It's about embracing the process of discovery and finding that spark of curiosity that makes you want to learn more.
And one final thought-provoking idea to leave you with: don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and explore new subjects or areas of interest. You never know what hidden passions or talents you might discover.
That's such great advice. It's about being open to new experiences and allowing yourself to be surprised by what you learn along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the most amazing discoveries, right?
It's so true. And sometimes those discoveries can even lead to, like a change in career or a whole new way of looking at the world.
Yeah, I think that's what I find so fascinating about learning, that has this incredible power to transform us in ways we never thought possible.
Couldn't agree more. And with the right mindset, and the right tools, learning can be such a rewarding and fulfilling experience. It doesn't have to be a chore.
Totally. So to our awesome listeners out there, remember to keep that curiosity alive. Embrace those aha moments and never stop exploring the vast world of knowledge out there.
That's it. And with that, we'll leave you to embark on your own learning adventures.
Yep.
Happy studying, everyone.
Yeah.